Alright guys, in this video we're going to talk about type conversion. So type conversion or typecasting is the process of explicitly converting a value from one type to another. For instance, you may have a string value of 5, so 5 with quotes around it, and you want to convert it to a number of 5 so that you can maybe do some arithmetic operations on it or whatever you're going to do. Now there's also something called type coercion, which can be explicit, but it usually refers to having your types changed implicitly, okay, without you purposefully doing it. So we're going to talk about that in, I think, the video after the next one. But in this one, I'm going to show you how to explicitly convert types. Now, let's say we want to convert a string to a number. So I'm going to say let amount, and I'm using let because I'm going to reassign this, but let's set it to 100 wrapped in quotes. And then let's do a console log of the amount value as well as the type. So we'll say type of amount. And if I save that, you see we get 100 and string. So there's a few reasons you might want to convert this to a number. If, let's say, someone's submitting a form and the number comes in as a string, but you want to run some operations on it, you can't do that with a string. You want to change it to a number. So there's a couple ways we can do that. The first is using the parseInt function. So we can say amount. I'm just going to reassign it to, let's say, parseInt, which is a function. So we use our parentheses, and this is going to take in the string, okay, which is in the variable of amount. So now if I save that, you can see we get 100, which is now a different color, and we get number as the type. Now another way to do it is by using the unary, I think it's called unary operator. It's just basically the plus sign, and this is the method that I like to use. It's a newer way to do it. So we can say amount equals and then just do plus amount. So if I save that, you can see that also converts it to a number. And then the third way we can do it is with the number method or the number constructor, and we do that by just saying number with parentheses, and then we can pass in a string, and I save that. You can see now we get it as a number. So those are some different ways you can use to parse it to a string to a number. And I'm just going to put a comment here. Let's say change string to number. All right, now let's look at some ways that we can change a number to a string. So I'm going to come up here and change this to 100, which is a number. If I save this, you'll see it's a number. And now I want to change this to a string. So one way we could do it is say, let's say amount equals amount, and then there's actually a method called toString. Okay, so a method is a function that's attached to an object. Now if I save this, you'll see it's now a string. Now this actually brings up a question, or it should bring up a question. We know that this right here is a number, which is a primitive type, which means it's not an object. Now methods are properties on objects, so why does this work? This should be a primitive. It doesn't have methods. Well, the answer to that is JavaScript actually creates a temporary wrapper. When we use toString, it creates a temporary wrapper of the appropriate object type. So this amount, which is a primitive, doesn't intrinsically have any methods on it because it's not an object. But since we're trying to use toString on it, JavaScript creates a temporary wrapper of the associated type. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, that kind of stuff isn't really beginner JavaScript, but like I said, I want to touch on some of the fundamental concepts and how JavaScript works as you go through this course. So you might not retain little things like that, but that's okay. As long as you remember the syntax and what's going on, that's fine. You don't really have to know what happens under the hood, but I do want to just talk about some of that stuff. Now another way we can do it is we can say amount equals, let's just comment that out. So we're going to say amount equals, and then we can also use the string constructor just like we have a number constructor. So I'll pass in here amount, and now if I save that, you can see that it is a string. Now, if you have a decimal, right? So if let's say this is amount is 99.5, and you want to let's say it's a string of 99.5, and you want to convert it to a number of 99.5, which is a decimal, there's a method you can use called parse float. You don't want to use parse int because that's going to be an integer, which is either a positive or negative number. So let's come down here and let's say change string to decimal. So what we can do is say amount equals, and to use or to change it to a decimal, we can say parse float and pass in the amount, and then let's save that. Now the actual type, like within JavaScript, is going to be number, but let me show you what happens if we use parse int. If I say parse int and I save, it's going to be an int. It's going to be 99. The type underneath is still number either way, but it's going to screw up your formatting if you need this to actually be 99.5. So in that case, you definitely want to use parse float. All right, and I'm just going to change this to change to convert. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is the Boolean constructor, which will turn a number into a Boolean. Now, in JavaScript, we have a concept of truthy and falsy values, and I'm going to get into that soon. But for now, just know we can actually change a number. So let's make this back into 100. Actually, let's make it into a 1. And then let's come down here. Let's say convert number to Boolean. And I'm going to say amount. And I'm going to set that to Boolean. Remember, Boolean is a true or false value. I'm going to set that to amount. Let's see what we get. So as you can see, we get true, and we get the type of Boolean. Now 1 is what we call a truthy value. If we convert it to Boolean, it's going to be true. If I set this amount to 0 and we save, we're going to get false. Okay, 0 is a falsy value, and I know that that sounds confusing, but I'm going to have a whole video on truthy and falsy. And then any other number like 10 or anything else is going to be true. 0 is the only one that's going to be false. Now let's look at what happens if, I'm just going to comment this out. Let's look at what happens if we try to take a string that is not a number, or I should say is not a number in a string, like something like hello. And what if I try to parse that into a number? Let's see what we get. So we get a value of nan, or NaN, and what this stands for is not a number. Okay, it's actually a special number. As you can see, it does have the type of number, but it's a special number that represents not a number, and this is kind of confusing. So there's some really strange and quirky aspects of JavaScript. The good news is most of it doesn't get in your way in practical development. It's just when we start to dig down deeper, things can get a little weird. So nan is a property of the global window object, and it's a non-writable property. And there's actually 5 different types of operations that can return nan. And that's when a number can't be parsed, which is what we're seeing here. Also math operations where the result is not a real number, like trying to do like square root of -1. In fact, let's say console log, and I know we haven't talked about the math object yet, but there's a square root here, and I'm going to do -1. If I save, you'll see that also gets nan. Another one is if the operand of an argument is nan, like if I do 1 plus nan. Let's try that. Console log 1 plus NaN. Okay, we get nan. Also, if we try to do like undefined, let's say undefined plus undefined, that gives us nan. And then the last way we can get it is any operation that involves a string and is not an addition operation. So if I do like a string, let's say foo, and we'll say divided by 3, I also get nan. So those are the 5 ways that you can end up with this. But the most common thing you're gonna do here is convert a string to a number, especially when you're dealing with like form data, because you might want to do some operations on a number that you can't do on a string. All right, so that's it. In the next video, we're gonna look at operators.